Katie. We have the clue in the diary. We are on chapter 3, the diary. Did you hear what Ned Nickerson said? Bess Marvin teasingly asked Nancy, who pretended to be intent upon her driving. You've made a hit, all right. Hit? Nancy retorted. The only thing that was hit was the back of my car. Won't Dad be shocked when he sees the wreck I'm bringing home? She's trying to change the subject, George chortled. Look at her blush. You can tell she likes him. Why shouldn't I? Nancy defended herself stanchly. Ned Nickerson certainly helped us out of a tight spot. He's handsome, too, Bess giggled. And what a soulful expression in those big blue eyes of his when he looks at our Nancy. Were they blue? I thought they were. Nancy broke off as she realized that Bess had deliberately trapped her. All right, you win, she laughed. But just to get even, I've half a mind not to tell you what I discovered while we were at the fire. Oh, come on, George pleaded. All right, I'll forgive you this time. Nancy was eager to relate what she had observed at the Raybolt grounds, for she wondered if her chums would interpret the incident the same way. She told them of the suspicious, gaunt-looking stranger who had run away from the burning house. That man must have set it on fire, Bess declared. Otherwise, why would he be afraid to answer when you called? He might have been a tramp who went into the house for shelter, George suggested thoughtfully, and started the fire accidentally, perhaps from a lighted cigarette. I thought of that, Nancy admitted, but it seemed to me if the fire had begun that way, it would have burned more slowly. Remember the sound of an explosion and how the house appeared to blaze up all at once? That's true, George said, then added, Guess we'll have to wait for the investigators' reports. There was not much traffic that evening, and the girls reached River Heights in good time. There's Mother out on the porch, Bess cried as they drew up before the Marvin residence. She's been watching for us. Next, Nancy dropped George at her house and then drove to the Drew house. As she pulled into the driveway, her father and Hannah Gruen, the housekeeper, came rushing out. Mr. Drew was tall and distinguished-looking. The housekeeper, pleasantly plump, had a motherly expression. Are you all right? They asked Nancy in unison. Yes, indeed, but I'm afraid my car will never look the same again. I don't care about the car, Mr. Drew said to his daughter, as long as you're not hurt. Then he relaxed and asked, The question now is how big a lawsuit will I have on my hands? Suit? Oh, I see. You think I backed into another car. Don't worry, another car ran into mine. I have the driver's name and license number. I'm to get in touch with him and let him know my repair cost. As they entered the house, Mrs. Gruen went to the kitchen, while Nancy and her father turned into the living room. Tell me more about the fire, Mr. Drew urged. Whose house was it? The owner is Felix Raybolt. Felix Raybolt? Foxy Felix! Mr. Drew exclaimed. Do you know him? Nancy asked, surprised. Only by reputation, which isn't enviable. As a matter of fact, just today I accepted a case for a client, Arnold Simpson, who wants to sue Mr. Raybolt. He tells me there are many other people who would like to do so. What is Mr. Raybolt like, Dad? Very shrewd and very unfriendly. I understand he's very wealthy. How did he make his money? He deals in patents, and I've heard he made some fortunes on some of them. You mean Mr. Raybolt invents things? Nancy questioned. No, he buys patents from inventors and cashes in on their ideas. Is that legitimate? Yes, he has a right to buy a patent and make a profit from it. The unfair part is that Raybolt takes advantage of the inventor by verbally promising to pay him a royalty after he has marketed the device. In fact, that is the complaint of my client. He told me that Raybolt purchased a patent from him covering a certain part for an automatic elevator at a ridiculously low figure, then sold the patent to a manufacturing concern for a much higher sum. When Mr. Simpson reminded Raybolt of his promise, Foxy Felix turned him down, practically laughed in his face. No wonder people dislike Mr. Raybolt, Nancy remarked. I suppose there are certain persons who might have set fire to his house out of pure revenge. Undoubtedly. After a light supper, Nancy admitted being tired. She said good night to her father and Hannah and went upstairs. As she slipped off her dress, the red leather booklet which she had found on the Rabel's estate dropped to the floor. Nancy snatched it up with an exclamation of eagerness. "This may furnish the clue I need," she thought. "At any rate, I have an idea it will prove interesting. I'll read it this very night." Nancy forgot that she was tired and sleepy. Undressing hastily, she adjusted the reading lamp and took the book to bed with her. This is a diary, she decided, noting that each entry was preceded by a date. Perhaps it contains the owner's name and address. Settling herself comfortably against the pillow, Nancy opened the loose-leaf booklet. She stared in surprise at the first entry. The page was filled with baffling words, written in a foreign language. She studied the text. Finally, two familiar words struck her eye. Adieu, goodbye, and God van, good friend. Swedish, Nancy murmured, recalling that a schoolmate of hers, a girl from Sweden, had often spoken these words in her native tongue. "Oh dear, I can't read the rest of it," the young detective groaned. She rapidly leafed through the pages. All the entries were in Swedish, except the last few, which were written in cramped English. Nancy held the diary closer to the reading lamp and tried to make out the words. But it was a discouraging task, since the letters had been run together in an indistinguishable fashion. She did manage to decipher a few scattered phrases, but try as she would, Nancy could not figure out a single entire sentence. "How exasperating," she thought impatiently. "This diary may contain a valuable clue, but I can't read it." The notations in Swedish were in larger handwriting than those in English. Nancy felt sure the diary belonged to a man, for though the writing was small and cramped, the characters were bold. She reflected, too, that if the little journal had been dropped by the stranger whom she had seen running away from the fire, it was all the more important for her to learn his name and what he had written in the diary. "I have to find someone who can read Swedish," she said to herself. "If only Karen were here!" But Nancy's former schoolmate had returned to her native country with her family. With that thought, Nancy lowered her pillow, put out the light, and the next instant was asleep. It seemed only minutes later when she was awakened by the ringing of the telephone in the hall. The sun was shining through the windows, and from the angle of the rays, Nancy guessed it must be after 9 o'clock. Hannah, knowing she was exhausted, had let her oversleep. With a guilty start, Nancy jumped out of bed. Before she could open the door, Mrs. Gruen came in. "Good morning, Nancy. A young man wishes to speak to you on the phone." "I'll be there in a jiffy. Don't let him escape." Thrusting her feet into dainty black and gold slippers and snatching up her dressing robe, Nancy hurried to the hall telephone. "Hope I didn't get you out of bed," a low, pleasant voice came over the wire. "This is Ned Nickerson." "Oh!" Nancy stammered, completely taken by surprise. "You probably think I'm rushing things a bit," Ned went on, "but I picked up a ring at the Rabel's this morning and thought it might be yours." "I didn't wear one yesterday," Nancy returned, finding her voice at last. "George or Bess might have lost one, though." "The ring couldn't be theirs. It has a D on it." "Did you find the ring in the ashes?" Nancy questioned with rising interest. "No. The firemen and police won't let anyone go near the ruins. I found the signet ring near the hedge back of the house." There was a brief moment of silence as Nancy mulled this over. Then she asked quickly, "Does that ring bear a Swedish inscription? If it does, I may have a clue to the owner." She was thinking of the stranger she suspected of being the owner of the mysterious diary, the man who had vanished behind the Rabel's hedge. "There is an inscription in a foreign language, but I can't read it," Ned told her. "Say, would you like to see the ring?" "Love to," Nancy confessed. "It may furnish a clue, but shouldn't the ring be turned over to the police?" Ned did not agree. "I believe, at least for the time being, it's a case of finders keepers. The ring was a good distance away from the fire area." "All right, then. I am eager to see it." "If you let me, I'll drop around tonight at 8 and bring the ring along," Ned offered. "Good." After Ned had hung up, Nancy fairly danced back into her bedroom. She sent one slipper flying toward the bed and the other into the far corner of the room. The young sleuth attempted to convince herself that her jubilant spirits were the result of Ned's discovery. The ring might be a clue to the identity of the person who had set the Raybolt house on fire. Bess and George, she knew, would have interpreted her reaction very differently. As soon as she had dressed, Nancy picked up the diary and placed it in her top bureau drawer for safekeeping. I wish I had some time to go somewhere and have it translated right now, she thought regretfully. But it's late, and I must take my car to the garage. Nancy hurried downstairs to the kitchen. Mr. Drew had already eaten breakfast and left for his office. Hannah Gruen uncovered a hot plate on the stove. Blueberry muffins, Nancy said. After biting into one, she added, "Oh, this is extra delicious." As she ate, Nancy told the housekeeper about wanting the diary translated. "But kept confidential, I suppose," Mrs. Gruen remarked. "It's not often that I can help you on a mystery, Nancy, but this time I believe I can." Ooh, we'll have to see what Hannah can do. Do you think maybe she can speak Swedish? We'll find out.